Please welcome Mr. J.B. Bernstein.
Wow, this is a pretty good applause. You guys know I'm not really Jon Hamm, right? I'm legally required to say that because apparently we look so much alike. I'm not supposed to laugh at that, ladies. So, the speech I'm giving today is called Hey, Where's My Big Idea? It's one of my favorite speeches to give. It's based on a book that's going to be coming out that I wrote coming out in 2018 now. I have one book coming out in between. But the thought is this, is who here thinks they can come up with big ideas? Anybody? Handful of people. Here's what I'm here to tell you. Every single one of you can. And that's what drives me crazy about coming up with big ideas, because I used to think just like you guys. I used to think, hey, you know, people just come up with ideas and those are idea people. But the reality is this, my publisher pushed me. And he said, you've come up with all these big ideas, not just $1 million arm, all the way back to the beginning of your career. You come up with all these big ideas. What's your system? And I just laughed. I said, I don't have a system. And he said, so what's more likely? The fact that you were born with all these ideas in the recesses of your mind and they just kind of shake out into fortuitous market situations? Or do you have a system? And I said, well, since you put it like that, I think the latter is probably more likely, although everybody probably would like to think they're the anointed one. I'm not. So I started to think about that, and I started to really think about the system. What's my system? And it took me about 6 months, but I started to work it out, and I realized that subconsciously I was using a system. And I love giving this speech to entrepreneurs like yourself and people who are related and associated with entrepreneurs and young students who are first coming into it, because the most important thing about being an entrepreneur is understanding that you can come up with a big idea and you can turn it into a business with the help of places like Nick and all these great things that you guys are doing here. So ultimately, I always skip this first slide because I don't really like talking about myself, but very briefly, I'm a sports agent. I represent Barry Bonds, Barry Sanders, Curtis Martin, Emmitt Smith, current guys like Odell Beckham and Richard Sherman. I got a pretty good list of clients. I do corporate consulting. I've written some books, as I said. And the thing that I consider myself, though, when people say, what do you do? I say, I'm an entrepreneur. That's what I say. That's what I do. That's how I approached every single business I've ever been in, from very structured businesses like Procter & Gamble all the way through to what I do today. So let's talk a little bit about this system. So I break it down to 6 steps. Okay, it's very simple, 6 steps. And if you think about these 6 steps, I'll go through briefly here, and then we'll go through in very specific detail on all of them. I'll show you guys some case studies, and you'll see how the systems work for me, and then you'll be able to kind of take it to yourselves and tailor it to your own businesses. It's not going to work exactly verbatim for everybody, but ultimately, these are the basic steps to coming up with an idea. So the first one is information upload. What you put into the system is what you get out. Cross-referencing and good thinking, and I'll explain a little bit more about this, but the information in your head is no good if you can't access it. Eureka moment. Eureka moment is a really interesting point in the idea generation process, because you never know when it was going to happen. I was sitting watching a cricket match with 1 billion other people watching that cricket match, but I'm the only person who came up with the idea for $1 million arm, and this system will show you why I came up with that idea when most of the other people watching didn't. Then creating your business plan, taking an idea and turning it into a business plan. Getting capital, as Carl talked about, you know, the lifeblood to any entrepreneur is capital, especially on your first couple of deals where you don't have the ability to put skin in the game as much as you should. And then the last thing is creating a successful business. So, everybody here know what the 4 Ps are? 4 Ps, anybody? Business school, anybody? So, if you ever go to business school, you'll study the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps are supposed to be the backbone of all marketing. There's product, there's packaging, there's pricing and promotion. And those are all really good things to know and all really good things to have in your business. You have to know that stuff to be successful. But what I talk about is the 5th P, where everything flows from, perspective. The person who looks out into the market and says, that's broken, it needs to be fixed. That's not optimal. That doesn't work at all. This needs to be changed. This is antiquated. It's that perspective of looking at the world differently, looking at what's not working, where the log jams are, where things are messed up. And ultimately then, taking that idea about what needs to be done and applying those 4 Ps to it. So I laugh all the time when they teach these 4 Ps as the pillars of marketing and the pillars of business. And I say, what good are any of the bottom steps if you don't have something to fix? if you don't have a need to address. So I always like to outline the 5th P. So when I think about this, the 6 steps break out into 2 parts, okay? The first 3 steps are what I call 5th P steps, theoretical steps. The second 3 are executional, which are the 4 pieces. So when you think about that kind of 5th P and then the first 3 steps are really part of this theoretical process. So what's the first thing in coming up with an idea? Information upload. It's the most important thing in the world. What is an idea? An idea is simply a bunch of seemingly unrelated facts in your head that galvanize together at a specific point. So the only thing I can guarantee you about ideas is if you want to come up with an idea and some of the component parts of that idea are not in your head, you'll never come up with that idea. So when I'm trying to come up with ideas, what I do is I feed my head with information that I need to feed. A lot of my friends, they come home from work, they're all burned out, they put on SportsCenter, they slap on some headphones and start playing some kid in Norway in Call of Duty. I'm not saying that's not a great stress reliever, but ultimately you're not going to come up with a lot of great ideas doing that. What I do is I come home, spend time with my family, of course, and then at night I stay up and I'm reading foreign business journals. I'm looking at what teams and athletes and leagues are doing in other countries. I'm looking at what Pepsi and companies like that are doing in other places around the world, even in the United States, what minor league teams are doing. Any kind of information I can get about things that are working in my business. And that's what I'm trying to put in my head. The other thing I'm trying to put in my head is general business stuff. Demographics, what's going on in various countries, economically, socioeconomically, all the different aspects of things that I can leverage, where there might be needs that I can fix. Those are the kind of things I jam into my head. And ultimately, those become the component parts of what are ideas later. So let's talk a little bit about the second step. You've got all this junk in your head. It's very important to be able to categorize that stuff. A lot of the people that I work with use notebooks, and what they do is they have a notebook and they'll say these are promotional ideas. So they'll come up with an idea or something, this is a thought, or this is something I saw that was really good, and they keep them cataloged on their computer or whatever in notebooks. I do it all mentally somehow. I don't know how, I'm still doing it at that point, but somehow I keep it all in my head and it all is accessible when I need it. But that's the real key thing. It's not just enough to have this information in your head. You have to be able to go back and say, oh, you know what, I saw something. What was that thing I saw 3 months ago? That would be perfect for this. And that's a lot of what idea making is. It's taking these parts, having them in your head, and being able to access them. So that brings us to part number 3, the eureka moment. The magical moment where everybody, these idea people come to life, right? But all it really is the last piece of the puzzle clicking into place. So for me, and I'll show this in some of the case studies, but what happens is there's all these things rolling around in your head, and then boom, you see something, and all these unrelated facts galvanize into an idea. Say, hey, I can do that. And it's an amazing moment because you could be in a room with 1,000 people watching a presentation and the idea comes to you, but not everybody else. Why? Because you've spent the time putting this stuff in your head. You've spent the time categorizing it. And so when that last piece pops into place, you say, oh my God, we can do this. That's the magic of ideas right there. Once you get to these 3 steps, my advice to you is this. If you want to be an idea person, get a really big garbage can, because most of your ideas are going to be terrible. They all seem great right up to this point, by the way. Right in the eureka moment, you think you have got the next Nike, you've got the next Facebook, whatever. You're rolling in the dough. You're counting your millions up until this point. So here's the bummer points, right? Point 4 is where the rubber meets the road. So you've got this great idea, all these seemingly unrelated facts galvanize in your head, boom, and you have this eureka moment, and now you get this idea, and now you do a business plan. And the business plan will tell you everything you need to know about your idea and whether or not it needs to stay on paper or go straight to the garbage. There are so many ideas you see that I've had in my life that I thought would be great ideas. One that I always like to share, because it's always good to share your failures. Everybody can say their successes, but this is one of my failures. I spent almost 6 months and about $15,000 developing an idea that I had, because I go to a lot of sports stadiums, and women may not know this, but in men's bathrooms they have urinals, and they have these little fresh things in there. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you had the opposing team's logo on those blocks. And I said, that would be awesome. You know, you're a Yankees fan, you go in, it's Red Sox, and I thought that would be an awesome idea, right? And like I said, a lot of people say, hey, I'm going to go steal that. Well, don't steal it, and I'll tell you why. So, I made up prototypes, and I went and I started to go get the licenses, and I talked to the leagues, and the league said, let me get this straight. You want to make logos on so that people pee on our logos. And I said, well, I didn't really think about it from that standpoint. So the P-block idea died a quick death. But ultimately, that's the importance of the business plan. The business plan is the real barometer of success. The business plan is going to tell you not only everything you need to know about your idea, but it's your best chance of not failing. It allows you to be proactive instead of reactive. It allows you when you're sitting in front of an investor to say, oh, well, when the investor says, well, what about this? Well, I thought about that, and here it is on page 49. Here's this, here's that. It shows your level of dedication to the idea. It shows your level of preparation, and most importantly, tells you whether or not you should go to step 5. Because the last thing you want to do is walk in front of somebody you're asking for capital without having a great business plan. It's not enough to just have a great idea. Lots of ideas seem great. How are you going to do it? How are you going to make it happen? So there's this kind of dichotomy in becoming an idea guy, which is, come up with the idea, but then you also have to be great at execution. And that's why there are so few people who entrepreneurially are able to do both and not only come up with the idea, but then carry it through and get it started, which is why it's so important to have something like the NIC. Because the NIC bridges that gap. There are lots of people out there with ideas. You can go to Mike. Mike will tell you if your idea is any good or not. He'll help you write that business plan. He'll help you find capital and ultimately help you grow the business. It's an amazing resource. I never had that. I got everything in my life, baptism by fire. So you go to capital. How you get the capital isn't even as important as how you use it. Funny, I was on the other end of the table where I was asking people for money. Now people come to me and ask for money. And I always look at how people are spending money in their business plan to tell me what they really are trying to do. They say, oh, I need $50 million, I'm going to roll this out. And say, we don't even know if it works. How about we spend 30 grand in a test market and see if anybody wants this junk? And it's those type of things that show your respect for the role that capital plays in the entrepreneurial process. The reality is this, you have a million great ideas. If you can't fund it, if you can't find someone who wants to back you, if you can't back yourself, if you can't scale it up, you're not going anywhere with your idea. And somebody ultimately will see it, they'll knock it off, they'll have more money, and you're toast. So that's something that's really important. And one of the things I also want to remind people, especially for the younger entrepreneurs, skin in the game. Has anybody heard that term, skin in the game? Okay. So what it means is, you want money from me, what are you putting into this thing? You're putting in your time, so what? If this goes south, you don't lose anything. Well, I always used to say when I went in for my first deal and I was asking a guy for $2 million, which to him was nothing. The guy was worth like $1.8 billion. $2 million was nothing to him. But I knew I wanted him to know how serious I was about it. I had probably about 50 grand to my name at the time. My whole life. I had 50 G's. I was a young kid just out of college. And I said to him, listen, I can't really afford to do this, but I'm going to put 20% of my net worth into this deal. I'm going to put 10 grand into this deal, and it's meaningless in the grand scale of things, but I just want you to understand, if you think you can't afford to lose $2 million of your $1.8 billion, trust me when I tell you, I can't afford to lose 20% of my net worth right now. And so it was a move that ultimately the investor told me later. He said, I almost didn't even care what your idea was at that point. Almost didn't care. He goes, you're willing to put up 20% of your entire life savings to do this idea. He said, that's a real commitment. He goes, I knew you were all in. I knew you'd give it everything you could. He goes, not only did I know you wouldn't want to lose my $2 million, but you couldn't afford to lose your 10 grand. So even the smallest gesture, which seems like nothing at the time, psychologically is so important. And when you're talking to an investor, or you're looking to get money or even investment from these guys, and Nick, you want to show them how much you value that investment, because without it, you're going nowhere, right? And then the last thing is successfully launching and growing your brand. So once you get out there, it becomes a process. So you've launched the product. Then once you launch, then there's growth, there's maintenance, expansion, all those type of things. So when you really think about ideas, there's that two sides of things. There's the coming up with the idea, the 5th P, And then there's the executional stuff, the 4 Ps. So I always try to break out the system. So everybody with me so far? Yes? Yes? All right, good. So let's look at a couple of case studies so you can see how the system actually worked for me. First one was $1 Billion Arm. So what were all these seemingly unrelated facts floating around in my head? First and foremost was Yao Ming would be a great client to have. He's generated $2 billion in wealth for himself, of which his agent has taken over $200 million in commissions. So pretty good client. He's done pretty well. And anytime you make double the amount Michael Jordan's made in his career, you're doing pretty good. And so ultimately, I was thinking about Yao Ming. That's floating around in my mind. The other thing that's floating around in my mind is there's 1 billion people in India, just like China. They have the inroads to be able to monetize sports. They don't have anybody who's ever come over to the United States and been successful. And you start thinking about all these unrelated facts, and then boom, next thing I know, I'm watching this cricket match, and it occurs to me, I see this guy throwing a ball with a weird motion on a bounce, and I say, if that guy throws 95 miles an hour on a bounce, I get on Google, I said, how far is it between a cricket, where the guy's pitching and where the little wicket thing is? 60 feet. I said, wow, that's how far it is from a pitcher. I said, what's the size and weight of the baseball? It was almost identical. And you start, all these things floating around your head, and then boom, I'm watching American Idol, and I say, this is how you do it. I said, oh my God, this is how you do it. American Idol is the best contest, the best way to find talent. So I know all of a sudden I want to find a Yao Ming type guy. I know I got to go to India to do it. I'm watching the cricket match, I say, wow, baseball's a good sport. These guys throw like baseball's good. And then American Idol, I'm watching it, and I stand up on my couch, and I literally am with a bunch of my friends. I know I watch American Idol, that's lame, but whatever. And I'm sitting there, and I jump up, and I say, guys, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to India, I'm going to do an American Idol style show, and instead of singing, I'm going to have them throw a baseball. Instead of judges, we're going to have a radar gun. I'm going to find the guy that throws the fastest in all of India. I'm going to bring him back to the United States. I'm going to train him. I'm going to turn him into a baseball player, and I'm going to have my Yao Ming. And of course, in my experience, the response you get when you pitch your idea for the first time is always the same. And my friends looked at me and said, wow, dude, that's the worst idea we've ever heard. Needless to say, the idea worked out okay. We got 2 guys from our first contest signed by the Pirates. One of them is still pitching in AA. Looks like he has a chance to make the majors this year. The winner of our second contest, year 2, we saw 100,000 kids in our second year. Kid signed with the Nationals. He's in the farm team for the Nationals. Our third contest starts in 2016. We will see 500,000 kids in over 100 cities. It'll take us more than a year to run the contest in India. And obviously they made a movie, they did a book, a bunch of other things. So very successful idea, but you can see how none of these facts all seem related. They were all floating around in my head, and then boom, that galvanizing moment where I see something. Lots of 40 million people were watching American Idol, 1 billion people were watching that cricket game. Yours truly is the only one who came up with this idea because of the way I've trained my brain to think. Let's look at another one, Emmitt Smith's Run with History. So what I knew was that we wanted to control the record. The way these things work in sports, it's very scattered. And I'm not going to get into the whole background of it, but at the end of the day, I had 5 people I had to convince. I had to convince the league, I had to convince Jerry Jones, I had to convince our buddy at the Players Association, I had to convince the media, and ultimately I had to convince Emmitt that the best way to run this program was for him to control things. I knew that it would be very, very difficult. It had never been done this way before, where the athlete kind of takes the lead on one of his milestones. And so my eureka moment came. I was watching a specific press conference, and I noticed that in this particular case, the White House press secretary was positioning a topic in the way that, if it was a controversial topic, he was positioning it in a way that if the media kind of took a swat at the president about it, the media would look bad, because it was a racially charged issue. So I came up with the idea, I said, listen, we can't go to the NFL and say, hey, Emmitt wants to run this record because it's just best for him, and he's going to make the most money that way. So that wasn't going to be a pitch I could really stand on. So it just hit me. I said, you know what, why don't I use that same tactic and say, Emmitt wants to, so we got the whole group together, the league, the Players Association, the licensees, everybody. We said, this is what Emmitt wants to do. He wants to use this moment as an opportunity to celebrate the running back position, all the way back to Joe Perry, Jim Brown, all the great running backs as he makes this march towards the record. We want to look back and celebrate the position. And you know, a lot of these African-American running backs really don't get their due. And immediately, what are they going to say? No, 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 we're not doing that. So ultimately, I was able to kind of strong arm into it and put them in a position where saying no would have looked a lot worse than saying yes. So we got them to say yes. We created a business plan. This is now the landmark deal that is used in all sports when a guy breaks a record. So this is the deal. They get the Emmitt Smith deal. It worked out pretty well. We self-financed this one, by the way. It wasn't that much. It probably cost me about $100,000 to get this one going, get the logos, all the travel, and all that stuff. It's one of the most successful programs in the history of the NFL. We had 9 national sponsors and 30 licensees. Emmitt had his own machine at Dave & Buster's, a Motorola commercial. I mean, it was awesome. Everybody used the same logo. We did over $1 million in sales just in the stadium that day. A game, by the way, the Cowboys lost 9-6 to Seattle at home. It was horrible. But ultimately, it still did $1 million in sales. That was the highest sales number they'd ever done in the old Texas Stadium for any event ever. And literally, this is the standard deal now in the NFL for all these big career guys. Let's look at another one real quick. Wayne Gretzky. So I started a company called Upper Deck. I don't know if anybody ever heard of that company, but they're a baseball card company, and I was one of the founders. And we had Wayne Gretzky under exclusive. And so I said to myself, I said, he's about to break this Gordie Howe record. It stood forever. It's a big record. I said, I bet we could treat this thing like a Super Bowl. And what happens at the end of the Super Bowl? Everybody knows as soon as the game's over, what's the first commercial you see? Hey, buy the t-shirt of the winning team and the hat and the DVD. It's amazing how that's all prepared in less than 30 seconds. But in essence, I said, this is that big. And no one had ever done a player event like that. It's always just been a Super Bowl. It really been the only time they'd ever done anything like that. And I had a lot of people to convince because, the NHL, the NHLPA, the licensees, the broadcasters, no one wanted to do this. No one wanted to stop a game in the middle of a game and create this big moment and do this whole cutaway programming. But ultimately, I convinced them this, and I said, this is the one thing I knew. My big eureka moment was I said, look at the postseason sales. So what happens is some team wins and then it's over and the sales just fall off immediately. I said, what if you didn't sell Stanley Cup winning team merchandise until 3 months after the team won? You would sell 0. I said, you're missing that whole opportunity. He's going to break the record, and then by the end of the season, he's going to have 820 goals, and there's no record, there's no celebration, there's no product, no one's buying anything. I said, you got to create this moment, this milestone, this post to market around. Otherwise, you're not going to make any money out of it. And it's for everybody. Everybody wants a big hit. So they ultimately went for that, and we created a pretty amazing program. As it just goes to show you, you also have to have a lot of good luck as an entrepreneur. A lot of things are not outside your control. So we had a deal with HSN where they were going to do a cutaway, live cutaway, when Wayne Gretzky breaks the record. And so I said, okay, great, but you never know what's going to be the programming. Wayne breaks the record, and what do you think they cut into? They do like 1 million sports memorabilia shows. What's the one show they cut into? An infomercial for the amazing sweater maker. Now, obviously, not the ideal programming thing. What the most amazing thing was, the product sold out in 11 minutes. Every piece of product they had sold out in 11 minutes. And people just came to it. I don't know why. I can't tell you. Maybe people were knitting hockey sweaters, and then they just decided they would just buy one instead. I don't know. But the reality is, there are things that you can't control. Sometimes you have to be lucky. We had 6 national sponsors on this program. We had 24 licensees. Everything sold out across the board within 24 hours. It's still one of the most lucrative milestones ever the NHL's ever done. And again, this also became a standard deal where now when a guy breaks a record in game, they stop the game. That never happened before. And again, why didn't it happen before? Well, this is the way we always do it. This is the way we always do it is the absolute worst reason to do anything. Just so you know, in my opinion, the absolute worst reason to do anything is because that's the way it's always been done. One last one, Barry Bonds. So the Major League Baseball Players Association, I'm not going to give you a long lecture on this, what they do is they license out the players as a group. So they say, okay, Nike, you want to make jerseys? You pay us a royalty on all the jerseys. You can make whatever player you want, and then don't worry about it. We'll take care of the players. The problem is the Players Association doesn't really take care of the players. They take most of that money and put it in a strike fund, but of course, unless baseball strikes, the money just sits there. And a player like Barry Bonds or Derek Jeter, at the end of the year, gets a check for about $20,000. And that's his share, even though Derek Jeter probably makes up 5% of the $50 or $60 million in licensing revenue that's generated, he gets 20 grand, just like the backup shortstop of St. Louis Cardinals. Everybody gets that 20 grand check. And that seemed really stupid and terrible to me. So we went to the Players Association and said, listen, we want to take Barry's records in. You can keep doing his jersey and things like that, but we're going to do all the records ourselves and just deal with licensees ourselves. And that was my idea. The big eureka moment was, I'm going to separate the record from just his regular stuff. Well, in their infinite wisdom, the Players Association said, no, it's either all or nothing. We don't want to set a bad precedent. I said, well, all or nothing. I'll take nothing. So we pulled out of the Players Association. Barry Bonds was the first baseball player ever to operate outside of the Players Association for marketing. And they said we'd never be successful, it'd be a total bomb. We had 4 national sponsors and 50 licensees. In the first year of doing this, we went from making about 20 grand a year to just under $17 million a year. So a slight uptick in revenue, which was nice. But more importantly, the fans got a better product. Fans got a better product. All the same logos. Everything looked great. Everything was right. There was no competing sales. It was just a perfectly symmetrical product offering. It was perfect in every way. And we still operate that business for him today. So ultimately, again, another case study that shows you guys how this system really does work. So let me sum up. I'm a big believer in ideas for everybody. There's nobody in this room who can't come up with a big idea. Everybody in this room thinks. Everybody in this room sees things around them that don't work. Everybody wishes something would be different. Everybody in this room has had some thought at some point that is an idea. If you can do it once, you can do it all day long. You need a system. Hopefully you can take these and create a system out of that for yourself that works for you. Ideas are just these seemingly unrelated facts that float around in our head. And then some eureka moment galvanizes them. That's it. That's all an idea is. It's nothing magical. It's nothing mystical. You make an idea. Whether or not you realize it. You've done all the hard work. You've put all that stuff in your head. You figured out how to get it all organized. And ultimately, you put yourself in a situation to be exposed to a eureka moment. So that's all it really is. Driving innovation is so key. If you're not innovating, if you're not growing, you're dying in business. I don't care how good your company is. Ask Polaroid. Ask Kodak. There are kids in the audience going, what the heck's Kodak? Kodak was one of the biggest blue chip stocks ever growing up for me. They made cameras and stuff. Polaroid, it's funny, they made an Instamatic camera. They make flat screen TVs now. They don't even make cameras anymore. Look at Blockbuster. There are a lot of kids in the audience going, Blockbuster, what's that? But these are businesses that were resistant to change. What did they do? See, this is the way we've always done it. Didn't work. They went out of business. Big, massive Fortune 500 blue chip companies with 20, 50, 100,000 employees gone. Because they were resistant to change. They were resistant to innovate. They wouldn't acknowledge the fact that the market is changing around them. If you don't change, you're going to lose. You're going to be out. And then the last thing I want to talk about is relationships. For me as an entrepreneur, relationships are critical. Relationships are really the lifeblood of what we do. Because you've got an idea, Carl talked about it, connectivity. You've got a place like the Nick that can really help with that. But the reality is, as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to connect the dots. You've got this idea. You need to get a manufacturer. You need a distributor, or you need salespeople. You need the marketing. You need to be able to have relationships to help that business grow. And ultimately, that's where innovation and relationship come together. Is you can want to innovate, you can have great ideas, but if you don't have the network or the resources, like they provide here, to do it, you're never going to get anywhere. So I always like to leave with this quote, and this is my own homegrown quote. I made this up myself, believe it or not. What it says, if you're going to spend your career running anyway, you might as well be chasing your dreams. If you're going to spend your career running anyway, you might as well be chasing your dreams. I hope today you guys walk away with one thought and one thought only. you can come up with ideas. I'm no genius. If I can do it, as one of the most prophetic statements ever, when Barry Sanders hired me as an agent, called me up, and I had never been an agent before. I was doing corporate consulting. I had just sold my business with Upper Deck. And Barry calls me up and said, hey, I hear you're not working for Upper Deck anymore. What are you doing? I said, well, I'm just doing some corporate consulting. He said, do you want to be an agent? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you could be my agent. And I laughed and I said, I'm not an agent. He goes, oh, if my guy can do it, anybody can do it. Nothing was ever more true about a profession than mine. So I hope this inspires you today to go back, think about a system, think about coming up with ideas. You don't have to be one idea, it doesn't have to be two, it doesn't have to be 50. Don't stop. It's what's going to change this world. Thank you very much for your time today.